I had to let my dad's dream die for mine to live. That was kind of the breaking point for me. It was like I just felt terrible about my life and I didn't like the way it was going. And if people are afraid of me, then they will immediately comply.
When you look back in hindsight from that moment backwards, what are the series of decisions or the things that led you to find yourself in that position? And I ask that because there's a lot of people that can probably relate.
Totally.
And there's probably quite a consistent set of frog pads or stones that one has walking down for whatever reason that lead you to a position where you go, what the fuck? Whose life is this?
I think the one line summary for me was that like I felt like I had to let my dad's dream die for mine to live. And I felt like my entire life it had always up to that point had been like go to this school, do these studies. You know, I mean, it's a common thing. Like it's not like I had something that a lot of people don't have. Many people, and to be fair, I'm very grateful for the skills, discipline, et cetera, that instilled in me. Because I think you have the hard hand of an authoritarian parent when you're growing up, and it teaches you a lot of skills. And then, you know, the flip side is if you have a very laissez-faire parent, like you never learn those skills, which then benefit you later. So, you know, who knows? But for me, I knew that he just wanted me to be a doctor. That's what he was. That would have been his dream. I went to school as pre-med. And then it was like even changing my degree from pre-med to just a business degree was like a huge deal. But he was okay with that as long as I followed like the business path. And so when I did my 2 years of consulting, which is kind of the typical like 2 to 4 years you do consulting and then you apply to go to business school. When I was going through that process, I was answering the question for like the Harvard MBA, and it was like, how will Harvard MBA help your short and long-term goals? And I sat there for like 2 days trying to answer the question. And I was like, it just isn't. I want to start a business. And so that was when I kept trying to, you know, start that conversation with my dad, and it just wasn't really happening. And so that was kind of the breaking point for me. It was like I just felt terrible about my life, and I didn't like the way it was going. And for me, it was such a key point because the biggest line of reasoning I had for myself in order to convince myself to confront my father, or at least disappoint my father, or the version of myself that he wanted me to be, was to say that like I have to be comfortable dying in his eyes. And a lot of people and many people might think that was hyperbole, but for me, it was very true. Like I knew that I would die in his eyes, and I did. To give you context, so I had the gyms, and I opened up multiple after that. Got to about 6 locations, sold those, started a gym turnaround business, did that for 2 years. All the while, we weren't really, we were like okay in touch. And then we started the licensing business, which is Gym Launch, and that's the one that like really took off. And we hadn't been super in touch, and I get a call out of the blue, and he wasn't like a cold call. You know what I mean? I was like, this is weird. So I pick up the phone, and he's like, you're going to want to sit down for this. And I was like, okay, what's up? I was thinking like cancer, you know what I mean? I'm just like, what is it going to be? He was like, I'm sorry. And I was like, for what? And he was like, you know, everything. And I was like, okay. And I was very angry still because, and this is what I told him. So I was like, you know, that point when people like get on stage and they accept the awards, and mind you, at this point, I think we're probably taking home $1.5 million a month, you know what I mean, and take home like personal income from the license. It was a decent size, like I'm not, you know, conglomerate, like probably, but it was a decent sized business. And I was like, you know, when people get on stage and they accept awards for things, I was like, the first thing they always say is like, hey, I just want to thank my mom and dad for always believing in me. And I was like, I'm not going to say that. I was like, because you didn't. I was like, you're only saying this now once everyone believed. Because it's not belief anymore. It's fact. It's evidence. I was like, this apology means nothing to me. And besides that, I stopped caring what you thought 6 years ago, which is why I left. And so I had like, that's like, I could have just accepted it, and I didn't do that.
How do you feel about that?
Today I probably would have just said, thanks. I appreciate it. I know where he was trying. He was trying to extend an olive branch. And I just wasn't there. I was still seething. I was still very angry that I had not gotten any support during that process. And maybe that was very woe is me. But I was still very angry at that point. And, you know, to give also a little bit of context, you know, his response to that was like, well, we'll see how long it lasts.
You're joking.
No. So like my father, not like, he is a very strong personality. and so do I. And we both think we're right.
Are you angry about it now? Honestly?
No, I mean, like, I think I can still feel the emotions, but I feel like I've, thought about it enough to say that I can logically say, I think he absolutely did the best he could with what he had. He was a single dad, another country, raising a kid, trying to get that kid to fit in and do the things that, like, one of the things that I think my dad always wanted me to be able to do is, like, because he's darker skinned than I am. He's Middle Eastern. He always wanted me to, like, have access to, like, the back rooms where, like, deals were made that he felt like he wasn't a part of. And so he just wanted me to have that. And so I think he just drove me as much as he could to get that. It's just like when you're on the other side of it, like, all you feel is never succeeding. But I can appreciate it now in retrospect. But it definitely was it hardened me a lot. But that hardness, I think, has benefited me a lot in business.
I had someone on the podcast say a quote, which I've never managed to forget. They said, you've got to realize that everybody you encounter, everybody that does you wrong, if you were them and you'd been through what they've been through and you had their brain, you'd be doing the exact same thing. Yeah. And it's obvious on one hand, but it's also very kind of illuminating that think about the person that's wronged you the most. If you'd been through their shoes and you had their genetics, you'd be doing the exact same thing. Doesn't mean you have to let them off, but at least it evokes some empathy.
Have you heard you cannot both hate and understand someone at the same time?
True.
Like, if you truly understand someone, then you can't hate them because you understand why. Like, a lot of times the hate is from the unknown and not like, because you hate, because I mean, you almost say, you're like, how could, like, it's literally a statement of not understanding. Like, how could you, if you understood, then you would know how.
And that resentment is a byproduct of just not understanding as well. I was just thinking about resentment that I've had in my life when I think someone's wronged me. That sense of injustice. You're right. How dare you? Did you ever manage to get your fuel to burn less dirty? Are you burning less dirty now?
Yeah, I think so.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so. My team tells me that that's true. And if you look at, like, because I do have some older videos that I made from, like, years ago, and there's definitely a different vibe. I'm significantly friendlier now than I was then. I mean, even the way I interacted with customers and the team was, like, purely fear driven. Like, I was absolutely, because I didn't understand influence as well yet. So only the stick I had was, like, if people are afraid of me, then they will immediately comply, and it's effective for short durations, but not for long durations. But I didn't know any better at the time. And then that's when I, right around that point is when I met my wife, and then she just, changed my life. And she started running all the businesses, and I'd see her and everyone loved her. And I was like, man, I should do more of that stuff and less of my stuff.